Support for Soccer Today is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Man's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. I'm Kev Laramie and I'll be joined by Duane Rollins in a second as we invite you to click on that subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new video on YouTube, live on Twitter, Monday to Friday on a daily basis, and of course podcasts available everywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Joining me as always today is Duane Rollins as we have a wonderful show for you today. Upsets in the US Open Cup in the quarterfinals. We will have a lot of facts on that game. Canadian Championship preview later today. Montreal, Vancouver, York United, and Toronto FC will be in action. Also, we will do a CanPL review from the last weekend and look at the standings. But first, Duane, how are you today?
Pretty well. I'm excited to go down to the stadium tonight in blazing hot weather here in the city. It should be a very interesting game to play. We'll see what happens with that. Some spice already. There was an article yesterday, Alistair Johnson saying that he was never really a TFC fan because they snubbed him on the youth side. So the author of that article said it was a bit tongue in cheek, but still.
True. But there's also like a story. You can make a really good backline or midfield of players that were snubbed by TFC, from Mark Anthony Kay to Kamal Miller to also, of course, Alistair Johnston. But those are stories for another day as we get ready today to talk about an amazing upset last night. Sacramento Republic were playing against LA. We'll break it down late last night. Rodrigo Lopez, Mr. Sacramento, made a statement in that game late at the 70th minute. But we'll look at it later, Duane. Tonight, it's the Canadian Championship. It resumes. We have two games on the docket this evening. Here is our schedule this evening. Yesterday, Montreal took the plane and fly to Billy Bishop. They're playing Toronto tonight at 7 p.m. at BMO Field. It's the first game between the two in a long time, Duane. They haven't played each other this season. And after a few years that felt like every couple of weeks Montreal was playing Toronto, feels like it was deliberate this season to keep the first matchup late in the regular season and also in the Canadian Championship. They haven't faced each other in MLS, and tonight will be the first Canadian Classique of the season.
I mean, we talked about the last few years how it was losing its edge because when you play each other as much as they did, it was like 7 times some seasons. It was like, that's a lot. That's like, you can't have an edge that much every game. Montreal and Toronto and the soccer side have a long history already, and there's a long history between the two cities, but that's just too much. Like, it's just too much in a soccer contest. It takes the specialness out of it. This does feel a little bit more exciting to go down and watch Montreal because it's been a long time since we've seen them, as you just said. And it should be an interesting game. There's a lot on the line for both these teams. I mean, Montreal wants to get back to the CCL. Toronto, this might be all they're playing for this year. So this is a big game for both teams. This, arguably could be Toronto's most important game of the season, period. Unless they win it, and then the next one will be in the championship. Yeah.
It's true. And for Montreal, they do like the CCL. They want to fare better. They actually did not too bad this time around. But when we're looking at also bragging rights, it's a World Cup year. You want to have that. Oh, they're the Canadian champions because Canada's going to be in the World Cup. It will be conversation at that moment. And they haven't faced each other. And I am expecting a lot of rotation from both sides tonight. When we look at TFC's lineup in the last game, in mind with today, I'm expecting maybe Toronto's A lineup tonight versus the one they played last weekend versus New York, as you see on your screen. If you'd like to watch us versus listening to us, you can do so on video on YouTube and on Twitter with amazing graphics, amazing statistics, a plus value. We're the only ones to do it to this level. And you can find it, of course, on YouTube, which you can subscribe, and on our Twitter feed, also live Monday to Friday. When I look at this lineup, Duane, I do think Toronto will make some changes. And tonight, Toronto's true team will be playing against Montreal?
Yeah, I think the biggest change will be Jonathan Osorio returning to the lineup. As I highlighted on Monday's show, when Osario's not in TFC's lineup, they score half as many goals, literally double the goals when he's playing. So that's 1.6 versus 0.8. That's a significant difference in that. In fact, if you get 1.6, that's going to win you more games than not, as long as you can defend, which of course they can't. But that's another story for the day. That said, I expect him to get back in there today. Look, the question for TFC in this game, like every game, is going to be whether or not, as I just said, they can keep the ball into their own net, because they haven't yet this year, and that includes games against CanPL competition. So, that's not ideal. They haven't had a clean sheet since last October. That needs to change if they're going to go anywhere. I don't care what Italian they're bringing off the bench, unless he's dragging a couple defenders with him. That's going to be a problem.
And by August he might be injured anyways, right? That seems to be what happens normally. But when you look at Toronto's season so far, 15 points. They are 12th in the Eastern Conference. Montreal is third in MLS with 23 points. The Canadian Championship is truly what Toronto is playing for, but Montreal will have a defeat to avenge after a 1-0 loss against Austin. A better performance than some of the indicators would say. Montreal with a quite rotated lineup also last weekend. If we look at it, Choinière was playing in the role of Lassi Lapalainen. Lapalainen had COVID and he was still in the protocol the day before, got taken out of the protocol, wasn't ready to play. He will be available tonight. I am expecting to see maybe Montreal's true typical lineup tonight. If we include the 5 Canadians that need to start, I expect Waterman, Miller, and Johnston to play definitely. If you are defenders, or Broguillard, Choinière, Piet. And right away, because of Montreal's pool of Canadian players that are actually starters, it doesn't deplete them. We'll see for Toronto. They will be using a bit of the younger players to fill that Canadian quota. But when I look at that possibility for later tonight, I think Montreal will have maybe the edge in the best Canadian players on the field. And let's not forget, it's 5 out of the 11 players that needs to be Canadian, Duane. And if 5 of your 11 players are a little bit better than the other ones as Canadian players, maybe Montreal has an edge this evening as the best Canadian players of the two teams.
TFC's young Canadians have been playing all year, so their talent is not maybe as high as it might be in their careers yet. So they have a bit of a deficit there for sure. But they played a lot, so you're going to be used to what you see is what you get all year when it comes to TFC. And then this is a game that it's just going to be another game. They'll be out for it. I don't anticipate this is going to be a blowout either way. Like I don't think TFC is going to blow Montreal out, but I don't think Montreal will blow TFC out at home. As I said, it's a lot to play for. Montreal does not have a great history at BMO Field. I don't need to remind Montreal fans out there. It doesn't matter whether they were terrible or not. Toronto usually got up for these games. And it's an exciting tournament. I mean, the history between these two teams in this tournament goes back a long time, and there's been a lot of great events. There's been a couple blowouts both ways. 6-1 by Montreal, the 6-1 by 6-1 or 6-0, I forget. The Montreal win in Montreal in the second leg there a couple of years ago.
It was 6-2, 6-2, but it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I want to
6-1 the other one. Yeah,
exactly.
There's been great results. There's that late goal that TFC fans are talking about today, where Javinko won the game in the last kick. Yeah. Lots of excitement in this game.
The quarterfinals of the Canadian Championship led the way to the sole remaining Canadian Premier League team to be in this tournament. York United eliminated Pacific FC, who's the champions of the Canadian Premier League, on penalties. It was 2-2 that took place on May 24th. York United won 4-3 on penalties. And York United is the sole remaining Canadian Premier League team traveling from the GTA to BC Place to play against Vancouver this evening. It will be taking place, of course, at 10 p.m. All those games tonight are on One Soccer for the Canadian Championship. Vancouver Whitecaps, York United. York will fancy its chances against maybe a team that historically still has a losing record against Canadian Premier League team. Let's not forget, Vancouver is 1-2 against Canadian Premier League team over the last 2 years in the Canadian Championship. And if I'm York United, I'm ready for tonight. If I'm Vancouver, I have to be careful playing against York United, who are better than their standings would say.
I will correct you for the benefit of our Vancouver listeners. Vancouver has 2 wins against KPLs this year.
Two?
So they
Okay,
are
so
2-2. Although
two,
one of them
two,
was by
yes.
shootout, so technically it's one
That's true.
one of one.
Okay.
Yeah,
But yeah, 2-2.
2-1,
Still,
yeah.
it's not a winning record. So I guess that part was still correct.
Yeah. Look, so there's the defense there. It has not been a dramatic march to a final, but when Vancouver, when this draw happened back in the spring, we all looked at it and went, well, Whitecaps, this is your opportunity. Like, it's sitting right there. You own, I should say only, I don't mean to be dismissive, but they had the easier path of the other 2 teams in MLS to get there. They had to go through each other. So look, and if it's, I mean, look, I am cheering for York, obviously, tonight, not because I'm from Toronto, but because I, like anyone else who's a neutral in that, want to see the upset go through. And it would be nice to see a CanPL team in the final. I had the privilege of being at a final that a CanPL team was involved in, albeit this weird one here. If I can bring my scarf out, you can see it, this one here, the 2020 final that happened in 2022. It had edge. It had a something to it, but it didn't have true edge in a way that a true cup final that also has a CCL berth on it too. So I would love to see a CanPL involved in that. That would be amazing to see.
And when we look at Vancouver's side, Vancouver's coming off a big victory this weekend. Yes, a victory in a way that it's hard to say it's replicable. And I even want to bring your attention to maybe a couple of the statistics they had against Dallas heading into tonight. It's a win that I call a win that leaves some traces. It's a depleting win when you win and still didn't get possession. You ran around the pitch for 2 hours to get a 2-0 victory. Expected goals and all the big indicators were on Dallas's side. So for Vancouver, looking at this and looking at their standings, because they're not out of it whatsoever. Vancouver's 8th right now, tied on points to Seattle. They're a hand's throw away from a playoff position. So heading into this game tonight, they have to be mindful of their rotation. And out of all the Canadian teams, I think Vancouver's maybe the least amount of talent in their Canadian players. When we look at their players that started the last game against Dallas, that they did win 2-0, you got a couple of Canadians here, Tybert, Godinho, but they played. Cavallini, of course. You'll see those 3 tonight. But the talent level is not as high. And if I'm York United, that ain't even a problem. Your players are all Canadian, so I don't even have to think about this heading into this game. What do you think Vancouver is going to do tonight? And if we're looking at the betting opportunity here, the numbers are maybe a little skewed, and maybe there's value at York United.
Maybe if you want to bet there, Kevin has a link that you can get a good deal on there if you want. He could probably share that in a minute when he wants to. Look, Vancouver's the favorite. Let's not overthink this. They do have more talent. Lucas Cavallini would be by far and away the Golden Boots winner in the CanPL if he played. We can be critical of him sometimes, but MLS is a higher level, and he is scoring right now in MLS. So look,
he would score like 25 goals in the CanPL. It would not even be funny.
Yeah, and that's not dismissive of the CanPL. That's not what it's about. It's not about players like Lucas Cavallini. It's about getting players up to Lucas Cavallini's level, of course. That said, they can in a one-off game compete, absolutely. And York has played well to get here. They are flying pretty high. They are going to want to go out an emotional high. They're looking potentially at a Toronto derby if they were to get through this, right? And that would be very exciting for them from a development fan perspective. So there's a lot on the line for them. So this will not be an easy test for Vancouver, but they are the favorite. What do? I think they try and ride the hand of Lucas Cavallini. They try and overwhelm them with that high-end talent that CanPL teams simply can't meet. That's the same thing any CanPL matchup is do. If you can get your stars firing and overcome that effort deficit, then you can win these games. And when you get to a semifinal level, that effort deficit shouldn't be there. It's one thing at the quarterfinals or before when you're playing a CanPL team, you kind of get it that maybe like in Toronto's case, like a Pozuelo or a Cavallini, or in Vancouver's case, or a Miller or whoever. In Montreal's case, they might not be as geared up, but when you get to this level, you can smell the trophy. You're going to play as hard as the CanPL team, and if that's even, really 9 times out of 10, the better team should win. But as we talk about US Open Cup later, it doesn't always happen, of course.
No, exactly. And you're right, Duane. Later on the show, we will be talking about the US Open Cup. We'll break down all the games in the quarterfinals, the results, and talk about some facts. Duane did some research, and we'll talk about some great facts about the Rochester Rhinos and more after the break. We'll also look at the Canadian Premier League, then the standings and the results from the last few games. Finally, a win for Edmonton, and we'll break it down later today. But now it's time to talk about our sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped, the worldwide leader in men's grooming product with the amazing Performance Package 4.0. Yes, you can find in this Performance Package the great bag that it comes with it. Travel bag, leather. It's an amazing product, by the way. And inside, if you are an athlete, if you are a soccer player, and if you also like to not have chafing between your thighs, the anti-chafing Manscaped boxers that come with the Performance Package 4.0 will be very useful in your athletic routine, in your daily routine also. Great product. Also comes with the Performance Package 4.0. You get the ball toner, a crop reviver that makes you feel nice and fresh before you head out of the door. Also, the ball deodorant, like I was talking about, it is a great product to make sure that it smells amazing for yourself, for your partners, for anybody, for everything. And of course, Lawnmower 4.0, the pièce de résistance in this performance package, has an LED light. It vibrates, as you can hear right here. It also does charge wirelessly with the charger that comes with it, and the weed whacker for your ears and your nose. All great product that you can get at 20% off with free shipping worldwide with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always have the right tool for the job with Manscaped. We'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Larme with Duane Rollins as we say thank you to our patrons. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/2solitudes. Great human beings. Some of those human beings were at the Grand Prix last weekend. They're social media friends for a long time. It's fun to see what you're up to. Blue Collar Dan, let's go. Sean, almost over school. And if you want to join those great human beings, you can also do so when you go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes. And you will have a brand new edition of the Two Solitudes podcast in the next coming days, when Duane and I will talk about the latest on the U20s, Canadian national team, and more at patreon.com/2solitudes. Upset in the US Open Cup. Some would say cup set. The LA Galaxy and Greg Vanney are out. They will not have a double. No matter what they do, they can if they win the Supporters Shield and MLS Cup, but they will not win the US Open Cup. The Sacramento Republic has sent a message and are through to the semifinal, Duane.
Yeah, and look, I have a soft spot for Sacramento for a lot of reasons. I've got to know a few of the people that are involved in that. We've talked for a lot of years. We talked to Sacramento because they were always the up-and-coming team that was going to maybe get to MLS, and I always sort of wondered whether they might be Rochester, the next Rochester, and we'll talk about that in a minute of what I mean by that.
You were right, but they also were not going to make it to MLS, which you were right to.
Yeah, and I don't want to be right there, but nonetheless, it would be great for Sacramento. And I say this as a complete neutral of the U.S. Open Cup tournament, which is a wonderful historical tournament. I would love to see them be the team that takes that and is able to be a USL team that knocks it up for exactly that reason. Because they, let's just be blunt here. They got screwed by MLS. They absolutely did. Like, they got strung along.
Also, one of the owners he went bankrupt. So they got screwed by that owner and MLS,
Yeah. Well, I mean, MLS moved the goalpost right. Well, this is an old topic. You can go to our archives, you can find it out. But nonetheless, look, they have a great little USL team there. I just said a little that sounded condescending. I didn't mean it to do. They have a good thing going there. The fans there have bought into that. That's a long-established program. That's a team that is well supported, and they have a very well-deserved great night against the LA Galaxy team that has a terrible history in this tournament and will continue to have a terrible history in this tournament.
Yeah, it's not a good look for Greg Vanney. Here are the statistics in this one. Connor Donovan scored the tying goal in his own net when it was at least already 1-0 because Rodrigo Lopez, Mr. Sacramento, Mr. Republic FC, Rodrigo Lopez, who has been their best player forever since I can remember. I remember talking about Rodrigo Lopez 5 years ago when we were talking about Sacramento. they were in the NASL, right? So that's a long time ago when Sacramento was in the NASL. He was a player back then, and then to the move to the USL between that and the Sacramento Republic, it was 1-1 until late in the 70th minute. Luis Felipe Fernandez sent social media in a frenzy when he scored the winning goal at that point. And they held on for the win. Big win on the road at Dignity Health Sports Park. This LA Clasico, kind of. Rodrigo Lopez and Luis Felipe Fernandez will remember for a long time. 36% possession, 9 corners. They did affect some pressure, but did not get the whole ball a lot. They played the game the way they could to win the game. And they beat the Galaxy fair and square. Sacramento into the semis. And Duane, you did some research, and we can look at the little facts that we can put on the screen right now. This is the first semifinal including a non-MLS team since USL's FC Cincinnati in 2017. Before that, it was Richmond Kickers in 2011. It's the last non-MLS team to win the US Open Cup. It's the Rochester Raging Rhinos in 1999 with Bob Lilly, if I'm not mistaken, at the helm, who actually became Montreal Impact coach later in his career. But the Rochester Raging Rhinos in 1999 were the last non-MLS team to win, and Sacramento Republic still in the tournament.
And Pat Onstad, Canadian international Pat Onstad, was their keeper just before he went to Houston and won MLS Cups there, or Seattle, I'll say it first. But and back then the gap between USL it was USL then, right? It's hard to keep track of the alphabet soup that were the leagues, but the gap was not, or was it A League or was it USL? It doesn't matter. Anyway, the gap wasn't as great, but now for them to get back to this, for Sacramento to get to a semifinal, that's a significant accomplishment. Because even looking back to that Cincinnati team in 2017, they made a semifinal. Yeah, it's an accomplishment for them, but they also were spending at a rate that was far greater, like in terms of percentage difference of other USL teams than Sacramento is right now. That was a team that was absolutely gearing to MLS at that point. Ironically, they were better in USL than they were in MLS when it got right down to it. But
by the way, it was against the New York Freedoms. And if you're wondering, there's also more Canadian content. Not only Pat Onstad, but Mauro Biello was playing for the Rochester Rhinos in 1999 when they won the U.S. Open Cup against the New York Freedom. Well, that was in the second round of the 99 U.S. Open Cup. And Mauro Biello, a few other players were part of it. They won it in Columbus. Well, they won it in Columbus. It was against the Colorado Rapids at Columbus Crew Stadium. They won it 2-0 in 1999 for this wonderful team. And we can see maybe here, Duane, if you talk for a second, I can actually maybe even show one of the great images from this moment a long time ago where Mauro Biello and some of the great players from the Rhinos won a trophy.
That Rochester team was a very, very good team, if you don't know. And I've had the privilege. Michael Lewis, our friend from New York, gave me his book, and I'm in the middle of reading that. When it's done, hopefully we can have Michael on the show to talk about it. It was a team that really, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, were at the precipice of MLS. I mean, it's hard to imagine that now if you're new to the sport, but there was a lot of talk that Rochester, New York might get a team because people looked at it as an opportunity to go into a smaller market, be the big fish in the small pond, all that sort of stuff. It didn't work out for a lot of reasons. They built a stadium there, and it kind of is in disarray now, and that's why they ended up losing the team. They're coming back into it now at the MLS Next Pro level. That's great because it was a great market. But when I first got into North American soccer, Kevin, Rochester Raging Rhinos, they were one of the biggest teams that people talked about. I remember being on big soccer forums back around the turn of the century, and people loved the Rochester Rhinos. They were a huge talking point, and that was a great team, a team that in an MLS context probably could have made playoffs in MLS that year. So it's a good team.
Exactly, and that was a like you mentioned earlier, a time where the disparity between MLS and whatever other leagues existed were actually really small, and some of the good players were alternating between years between the two. So Sacramento won 2-1 yesterday, and they will be moving on. Here are the other games in the U.S. Open Cup over the next tonight and next week, basically. Kansas City tonight against Union Omaha. Do you think Vermes is in trouble if Union Omaha wins tonight, Duane?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know because Peter Vermes is part of the furniture, and whether they're ever going to make a move there, I don't know. But in terms of his actual performance, yeah, he should have been in trouble weeks ago. So
yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
tonight also, a Hudson River Derby. New York versus New York City at Red Bull Arena. There will be some fireworks. Is New York blue? Is New York red? We'll know that later tonight. When, for the second time over a few weeks, they will play each other, this time in the US Open Cup. Winner moves on. And then next week, Orlando, Nashville on June 29th, next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And that will be the quarterfinals in the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. Before we say goodbye, I want to talk about FC Edmonton. I've been harsh. I've been giving him a lot of flack because they deserved a lot of flack for a long time, but let's give them their due. For the first time this season, FC Edmonton were able to say that they have won a game. Atletico Ottawa, no, that's a mistake here. FC Edmonton won 1-0. That's because finally got a result to go their way. I have to say, after really thinking that they needed to focus, and it's a team that has a lot of things going against them, from the ownership situation to the lack of roster move versus other teams this year. Biku Bissant scored at the 65th minute to give FC Edmonton the win. A 1-0 win, deserved win. 42% possession for Edmonton, 13 shot, 6 on target, almost 50%. Very high number. And FC Edmonton finally has a victory this season, Duane.
Yeah, I think it's been coming a little bit. Obviously, they struggled to defend. They have gaps in that team, there's no doubt. But having watched each of their last 4 or 5 games, knew that this was probably going to end soon, because they were doing one thing consistently. They were finding opportunities. They were getting goals. And as long as you score goals, particularly at home, you will find results. And it's deserved. And the emotion at the final whistle, you could see it in their face, the relief. Like, I've been involved, like not at that level, obviously, but I've been involved in sports teams that are really bad. And when you finally get a win, it feels better than when you win all the time in many ways. Not that you want to get there, but like the relief is palpable, and you can see it there. So you didn't want them to see them completely buried. The crowd was pretty bad. And look, we don't want to dwell on that, because when it's hard to support a team that doesn't win, but the fans that were there got to see it, and that's great for them. And look, we don't want this team to fail. I hear lots of people talking about moving this team and all this sort of stuff. No, we can't have that. We want this team to be successful. Getting some results at home is going to be what starts to drive that. They're not going to make the playoffs,
no,
clearly, but they just got to get some results, get some good feeling around that team again.
And if we could continue to look at the scores from the last weekend of play, last Wednesday, Valor lost at home against Cavalry, a 4-2 victory by Cavalry. Then on Saturday, June 18th, York United against Pacific FC was a 0-0 draw. On Sunday, the Wanderers at home lost a big one against Forge FC. They got a red card and they couldn't recover. Forge 3 and the Wanderers 0, which leads us to the table for the Canadian Premier League. Right now, if we are looking at this right here, Cavalry on top of the table still, 20 points. From last to first. They were last just a few weeks ago. Now top of the table, Cavalry with 20 points, one above Pacific FC. With a 5-3-4 record, Pacific FC is second with 19 points. Atletico Ottawa third, Forge FC fourth, HFX Wanderers fifth, York United sixth, Valor FC seventh, and FC Edmonton eighth in this table. When you look at the standings, anything surprising, Duane?
That noise you're hearing is the Ford juggernaut starting to roll. That team is flying on all cylinders right now. I think that they had to peak early on this year for the CCL play, that they really geared up for that, and it took them a while to get into the season, but they're scoring at will right now. That game against Halifax was a demand, like complete, they just took them apart. They had a big win against Pacific a couple weeks before that. They're starting to really look their part as the big bad orange machine of CanPL. And I'm for one, I'm all for it. Not because I'm a Hamilton fan per se, but I like the fact that there's a team that everyone else hates in the league, and that's Forge right now, and they're starting to look really good. So the fact they're in fourth is a surprise, but games in hand there. If you look at the numbers, and the last 4 results have all been trending towards them being on top of this table again by the end of this. Yeah. And Calgary right there too. Look, that's the big 2, East and West.
Well, I think there's a big 4, and I think we can maybe say York United, Cavalry, Pacific, and Forge. Those will be maybe the 4th favorite to make the playoff if they were to start tomorrow, in my opinion.
Ottawa's in the mix too. They've had a good start to the year, but I do think that that's kind of new in that project. They might be there. I think Atleti Ottawa, or Atleti if you prefer, is going to be a team that can reach up eventually using the resources that they have and be part of that championship mix. But right now there is the three: Pacific, Forge, and Cavalry. But I would, even with all due respect to Pacific, who are starting to really show the strain, and I'll wait once Pacific starts to play in the CONCACAF, the league this year, plays in CONCACAF, it's going to be a real strain on that resource, and I wonder how well they'll do that. There's a lot of Forge fans I talk to say exactly that, because they, Pacific fans, they're on top of the mountain and they like to snip back, and they're like, well, wait and see when you're playing on two different platforms like we were for the past couple of years.
York is also distracted by the Canadian Championship, and if they would have won tonight, if they were to win tonight, it would also complicate that going forward. But those are all great things to keep in mind. And of course, tonight, the Canadian Championship, we'll review it tomorrow. We'll review both games tomorrow. Statistically, we'll go deep into this great tournament that is ours. We'll talk about the Voyageurs Cup and more US Open Cup, more games tonight. We'll give the results tomorrow and see who's going on a cup run, if there's more upsets or not. Can Union Omaha eliminate Kansas City? That would be my fun time for this evening. You can get 20% off and free shipping worldwide at manscaped.com with the code SOCCER today when you get the Performance Package 4.0 or anything else at 20% off with the code SOCCER today at manscaped.com. You can unlock your confidence and always have the right tools for the job with manscaped.com. Don and I will record over the next couple of days the Two Solitudes Soccer podcast, and you can find it at patreon.com. There's the 3 tiers. There's the Two Solitudes tier where you get access to the podcast. There is the shout out tier where you see your name on the screen and we appreciate your support, and the shout out tier where we talk about the amazing human being that you are on every single show. And you can find more information on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Two Solitudes. That changed. But as always, until next time, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramie. We hope you enjoy this evening, and until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.